The wind rolled low and restless across the plains of Red Canyon, bending the tall dry grass into waves of dull gold. Caleb Turner rode slowly along the ridge, had tipped forward against the sun. His eyes narrowed against the dust that drifted in lazy spirals around his horse's hooves. Out here, silence wasn't empty. It had weight. It pressed against a man's chest and filled his ears until he could hear his own. Heart beat louder than the world. He preferred it that way. The ranch sat miles behind him now, cattle grazing near the creek bed. Fences mended for another season. Caleb had no reason to ride toward the canyon except instinct. The air felt wrong that morning. Too still, too sharp. Even Dusty, his steady bay gelding, had tossed his head more than usual, nostrils flaring. Then he saw it, smoke. Not the thin gray ribbon of a cooking fire. Not the soft haze of a controlled burn. This was thick, dark, rising in uneven columns beyond the bend in the canyon trail. Caleb slowed his horse and scanned the horizon. No movement. No riders cutting across the flats. No distant echo of gunfire. Just smoke climbing into the pale sky like a signal. He urged Dusty forward. The closer they came, the stronger the smell became. Burned wood, scorched cloth, and something heavier beneath it. Something metallic. Blood. When he reached the ridge overlooking the trail, the sight below rooted him in place. A wagon train lay scattered along the narrow canyon path. One wagon had overturned completely. Its wheels split, its canvas cover half burned away. Another leaned sideways against a rock wall, grates spilled open and flour bleaching the dirt white. Horses lay tangled in broken harnesses. The earth itself was torn up, marked by frantic hoofprints and deep gouges. Crows circled overhead, their cries sharp and impatient. Caleb dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He pulled his rifle from its saddle loop and checked the chamber by habit. His movements were calm, practiced. The kind of calm learned in places far worse than this. He descended carefully, scanning the canyon walls for any sign of lingering attackers. Whoever had done this knew the terrain. The wagons had been trapped in the narrowest stretch, boxed in by rock on both sides. No easy escape. He approached the first body, a man in his 40s, judging by the gray threaded through his beard. A trader, maybe. The man's hand still clutched a revolver he'd never had time to fire. Caleb removed his hat briefly. Further along, he found a woman shielding a small child beneath her. The child's face was pressed into her shoulder as if asleep. Caleb swallowed hard and looked away. He had buried enough memories already. The attack hadn't been quick. There were signs of struggle, drag marks, shattered lantern glass, a trail of spilled fabric bolts. He knelt beside a crate that had split open, revealing fine porcelain wrapped in straw. Not the typical supplies of poor settlers. This had been a wealthy train, which meant it had been a target. He moved toward the overturned wagon near the canyon wall. Its axle was snapped clean, almost deliberate. The canvas cover had burned, but not completely. A strange flash of color caught his eye, deep red against ash-gray wood. Silk. Caleb frowned. Silk didn't travel this route often. He stepped closer, boots crunching over charred debris. A soft flutter caught his attention, the edge of a sleeve tangled in a splintered spoke. The fabric shimmered faintly even beneath soot and dust. He crouched, setting his rifle within reach. Slowly, carefully, he pushed aside a broken plank. For a moment, he thought he was imagining it. Then he saw her. A young woman lay half-hidden beneath the wreckage. Her body curled slightly, as if she had folded into herself when the chaos began. Long black hair spilled across her shoulder, streaked with ash. A thin cut traced along her temple, dried blood marking her pale skin. Her chest rose faintly, barely visible beneath the embroidered silk robe she wore. Alive. Caleb's pulse kicked once, hard. He glanced around again, instinct screaming that survivors meant unfinished business. But the canyon remained still. Only the wind moved. He leaned closer and pressed 2 fingers gently to her neck. There it was, a fragile, steady pulse. "What were you doing out here?" he murmured under his breath. Her clothing was unlike anything he had seen this far west. The silk robe, though torn, carried intricate golden embroidery shaped like coiling dragons. The stitching was precise, masterful. Even damaged, it spoke of wealth and status far beyond an ordinary traveler. A jade pendant rested against her collarbone, partially hidden beneath soot-stained fabric. The stone was a rich green, carved with a symbol Caleb didn't recognize, complex. Lines twisting into one another like a secret language. She stirred faintly when he shifted the wood above her. A soft breath escaped her lips, almost a whisper of pain. Caleb hesitated. He lived alone for a reason. Trouble had a way of finding men who stepped into other people's battles. And this was no random robbery. Whoever had attacked this train had been thorough, organized. If they were hunting something, or someone. His gaze fell back to the silk. They might come looking. He exhaled slowly through his nose. "Damn it," he muttered. Carefully he slid one arm beneath her shoulders and another beneath her knees. She was lighter than he expected, fragile as a bird. As he lifted her free from the wreckage, the jade pendant slipped fully into view, catching a beam of sunlight. For a second, the green stone seemed to glow. Her fingers twitched weakly and closed around the pendant, even in unconsciousness. Caleb carried her toward Dusty, boots steady despite the weight of the moment. The horse shifted uneasily at the scent of smoke and death. "Easy, boy," Caleb whispered. He secured her in front of the saddle, wrapping one arm around her to keep her steady. Her head rested against his chest, her breathing shallow but present. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, no more than 20. Not a settler, not a trader's wife. Something else entirely. As he turned Dusty away from the canyon, the wind shifted, sending a final curl of smoke across the trail behind them. Caleb didn't look back. He'd seen enough. But as they rode toward the distant outline of his ranch, a faint unease settled deep in his gut. This hadn't been about supplies. It hadn't even been about money. Whoever had done this had been searching, and Caleb Turner had just taken whatever they wanted most. The first thing Caleb noticed when he stepped through the cabin that morning was the silence, not the ordinary quiet of his ranch. He was used to that, but a different kind, alert, watching. He set the water bucket down slowly beside the door, boots leaving faint prints across the wooden floor. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting a warm amber glow through the small cabin. And there, sitting upright on the edge of his narrow bed, was the young woman he had pulled from the wreckage. She was awake. Her long black hair fell loosely over her shoulders, cleaned now of ash and carefully combed with the old wooden brush Caleb kept for his horses. The bandage around her temple was fresh. Her posture was straight despite the injury, hands folded neatly in her lap as if she had been raised among walls far grander than rough timber. But it was her eyes that stopped him. They were no longer clouded by unconsciousness. They were sharp, aware, measuring him. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Turner Ranch," Caleb replied after a beat. "About 10 miles south of Red Canyon." A flicker of memory passed across her face at the name. "The wagon," she began. "Gone," he said plainly. "No one else made it." Her gaze lowered, and for a moment he expected tears. Instead, her expression hardened, not in cruelty, but in understanding, as if loss were something she already knew well. "You carried me here?" she asked. "I did." She nodded once. "Then I owe you my life." Caleb shifted his weight. "Don't know about that. Just couldn't leave you there." Her hand lifted instinctively to her neck. When her fingers found the jade pendant resting against her skin, relief softened her features. She closed her hand around it briefly, as if drawing strength. "My name is Lee May," she said carefully. "Caleb Turner." The wind pressed lightly against the cabin walls, and somewhere outside, cattle lowed near the creek. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. She took in the room, the single table, the iron stove, the rifle mounted above the fireplace. It was clear she was cataloging everything. "You live alone?" she asked. "Have for years." "No family?" "Not anymore." She studied him again at that, as though filing the information away. Caleb crossed his arms. "You want to tell me what really happened out there?" Her gaze drifted toward the small window. The sunlight beyond it was bright, but her eyes seemed fixed on something much farther away. "They were not bandits," she said quietly. "That much I figured. They were soldiers, not wearing uniforms, but trained." "Soldiers from where?" She hesitated. When she turned back to him, something in her posture had shifted. The vulnerability he'd seen days ago was gone. "I am not who you believe me to be," she said. Caleb let out a faint breath through his nose. "Reckon I already knew that." "I was born far from this land," she continued, "in a city of stone walls and golden roofs. My father was a prince of the Qing court. After betrayal within our own ranks, loyalists smuggled me away. We traveled in secrecy for months. The wagon train was meant to hide me among traders and settlers." Caleb blinked once. "A prince," he repeated slowly. "Yes, and that makes you, in your language, a princess." The word felt strange in his cabin, like it didn't belong among rough boards and iron cookware. "You're telling me men crossed half the world to chase you into this canyon?" he asked. She shook her head slightly. "Power crosses oceans easily. Those who fear my bloodline believe. I carry proof, documents that could rally old alliances. With such proof, exiled supporters could restore influence." "And do you?" A faint, almost secret smile touched her lips. "No." Caleb frowned. "Then why slaughter everyone?" "Because they believe I do." A heavy silence settled between them. Before he could press further, a distant sound cut through the air. Hoofbeats. Caleb's head snapped toward the window. Li Mei heard them too. Her expression did not change, but her fingers tightened slightly around the pendant. "They have tracked us," she said. "Ow!" Caleb demanded. The wagon was burned, but not entirely. "They would search for survivors. A single horse's trail leaving the canyon." She looked at him calmly. "You did not attempt to hide it." He muttered under his breath and moved to the wall, grabbing his rifle. Through the window he could see dust rising in the distance. 3 riders at least, maybe more, approaching fast. "You bring trouble with you often?" he asked dryly. Her eyes flicked toward him. "Only when hunted." The riders fanned out as they neared the ranch, circling slowly. They were dressed like ordinary frontiersmen. Wide hats, dusters, but their formation was disciplined, controlled. Caleb checked the chamber of his rifle and handed her a smaller revolver from a drawer. She looked at it briefly. "You know how to use one?" he asked. "Yes." No hesitation. The first gunshot cracked through the air, shattering the cabin window. Glass exploded inward, spraying across the wooden floor. Caleb grabbed her arm and pulled her down behind the thick oak table as bullets thudded into the wall. "Stay low," he ordered. Outside, a voice called out in heavily accented English. "Return the girl. You will not be harmed." Caleb barked a short laugh. "Don't reckon I believe that." Li Mei's gaze was steady, fearless. "They will not stop." "You got a plan, Princess?" She met his eyes evenly. "Yes." Another bullet tore through the doorframe. Dust rained from the ceiling. She leaned closer so her voice wouldn't carry. "They believe I carry documents proving my lineage. You said you don't. I do not carry them." His brow furrowed. "Then where are they?" Her eyes held his with quiet intensity. "They were never in the wagon." The meaning settled slowly. "You planned this," he said. "I planned for survival." Outside, one rider dismounted, moving cautiously toward the cabin. Caleb's jaw tightened. "You're full of surprises." "So are you," she replied softly. "Most men would have left me in the canyon." A strange calm settled over him then. He had spent years alone, convinced the world had no place left for him beyond cattle and fences. And now war had found his doorstep in the shape of a woman who carried centuries of legacy in her blood. Another shout came from outside. "Last chance!" Caleb rose just enough to aim through the broken window. His shot rang out, striking the dirt near one rider's boot, forcing them back. "They'll rush us soon," he said. Li Mei nodded once. When she spoke again, her voice was no longer soft. "If we survive this, Caleb Turner, you must decide whether you stand with a rancher's quiet life or beside a throne that does not yet exist." He glanced at her, a faint smirk tugging at his mouth despite the gunfire. "Let's survive first." Outside, the riders regrouped, circling under the blazing afternoon sun. Inside the small wooden cabin, a lonely rancher and a hidden princess prepared to fight, not just for their lives, but for a future neither of them had expected to share.